All right. So today we're going to look at First Samuel chapter 24. We're going to look at verses 8 to 22. If we've been keeping up to this point, uh, David and his men were hiding in a cave, and Saul was hunting him. Saul and his army were hunting David and actually ended up at the same cave that David and his men were hiding in, but they didn't know it. Saul goes in to use the cave as a restroom of all things. And while he's in there, David and his men notice him. David cuts off a piece of his robe, his kingly robe, but then feels so guilty about it because Saul is the Lord's anointed. And we covered what all that means and how much honor goes with that. And David felt so guilty just from cutting off a piece of his robe that he wouldn't even let anybody else attack Saul. Not only would he not kill Saul while he was there, he wouldn't let anybody else either who could raise their hand against the Lord's anointed. So that brings us up to verse 8. Saul has just left the cave. David and his men are still in it. What we're going to pay most attention to today is the phrase, out of the wicked comes wickedness, and what that means. So starting at verse 8, we're going to read 8 to 13 first and look at that. It reads, "Afterward David also arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, 'My lord the king.' And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage." So after he allows Saul to leave the cave unharmed, after he gets some distance away, far enough away that he doesn't have to worry about him coming back and attacking with his army, he first he calls him by a name of honor. He says, "My lord the king." And then after that, he bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. So we see that David is still treating Saul as though he is the Lord's anointed king, because he is. But Saul is still treating David as somebody who's trying to take his power away from him, which he's not. So again, we keep getting to the point where David is Saul's enemy, but Saul's not David's enemy. And there's a huge difference there. So verse 9, David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, David seeks your harm'? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave. And some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father." David calls Saul his father as a sign of close respect. "See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. May the Lord judge between me and you, and may the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you." There's a lot to take in there. First, if we look over on our map, we can see they are at the cave of En-Gedi here on the west coast of the Dead Sea. And this is just one of many places where these types of close calls happen, but it's one of two places where David could have easily killed Saul and did not. So he says, "Out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you." Over and over, he keeps saying, may God judge between us, but he's not going to do it by my hand. I'm not going to be the one that removes you. So out of the wicked comes wickedness. What's he mean by that? So it's a good speech. But David's saying he's leaving it to God to judge between himself and Saul in this situation. And he brings up this ancient proverb. It says, now it's not from the book of Proverbs. It's an ancient proverb, a saying of wisdom. But we can see this idea given in Daniel chapter 12, verse 10. It says, "Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand." So this prophecy actually comes to Daniel as he's sealing up the book, telling him about the future, up to and including the end times. But that covers us right now also. It seems to cover all time, because we can all understand that, yeah, out of the wicked comes wickedness. That makes sense. It's not hard to understand, right? But in Daniel, it's got a couple interesting parts, because it says, many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined. Well, now if he's talking about us in these days, how would we purify ourselves and make ourselves white? Well, that's through the blood of Jesus. That's through Christ. He's the one that purifies us. We take on his righteousness while he took on our sin. It's not a fair deal at all. We're definitely on the better end of that, right? Forever we should be grateful about that. But it goes on and it says, but the wicked shall act wickedly. This is something that will continue for all time until Jesus returns. And none of the wicked shall understand. We see that happening with Saul right now. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand what he's doing. He doesn't understand what God wants him to do anymore. He's just confused. He's apostatized so much that even in his own mind, you can see the battle. He's being torn back and forth. So we see the wicked. Out of the wicked comes wickedness. We see a allusion to that in Daniel. We see it again in Matthew chapter 12, verses 33 to 37. It's actually Christ talking here. He says, either make the tree, he's talking about knowing a tree by its fruit. Verse 33 says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. Well, he's not really talking about trees, is he? He's talking about us, right? We'll know each other by our fruit. So we can say we have faith in this or that. We could say we believe in Jesus. We believe in God. A lot of people say that. Show the fruit. James would be a good spot to look to see, that faith without works is dead. Show your fruit. If you want a proof of the Spirit working in you, and that you're not a tree made for the fire, there needs to be fruit. We'll go back to the words of Jesus, verse 34. It says, you brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, when Jesus is giving this talk about knowing trees by their fruit, and we seem to have this good tree and this bad tree, where do we think that Saul's falling into this equation? Now, we need to be careful. Don't pass too much judgment on Saul, or else the mirror might get turned back on us, right? We might see Saul's sins real easy and be completely blind to our own. But when Jesus is talking and he says, out of the evil person, or the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil, that's what Saul's doing right now. Out of the wicked comes wickedness. So why would David bring it up? What's that have to do with where we're at right now, right? Why would he bring that up? Let's reread starting at verse 13 and going to 15. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. Now after whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you, and see to it and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. So what David is saying is, my hand's not going to be against you, but as the proverb says, out of the wicked comes wickedness. Okay. So if I was wicked, wickedness would have come out. I just had the chance to kill you and I didn't. Out of the wicked comes wickedness. Now, if David was sleeping and Saul found him, would David have lived if it was up to Saul? It seems unlikely, because out of the wicked comes wickedness. We know that wickedness probably would have happened. He would have killed him. So, but David didn't have that wickedness come out. So after he turns that out, after he applies the proverb to him first, he says, my hand won't be against you, but after whom have you come out? So he's saying, okay, it doesn't apply to me. Let's see if it applies to you. And who have you come out against? After a flea? After a dead dog? He's saying, how insignificant am I? And he even addresses him as, after whom as the king of Israel come out, right? You are this important. You are the king of God's chosen people, and you've come out against a dead dog or a flea, somebody that's completely unimportant and not a threat to you at all. So David sees himself as insignificant, and he sees Saul as the anointed one of God. But Saul, all he sees is David's trying to take the kingdom away from me, and I need to stop it. So he proved his own wickedness by his own actions, while David has proven himself to not be wicked by his lack of actions, or his actions of stopping the men from killing Saul. Verse 16 says, as soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Yeah, David has done nothing but good to and for Saul, because Saul represents the kingdom of God. But Saul has done nothing good for David. He's lied about wives. He's lied about safety. He's hunted him for years. They couldn't be more different. But Saul's having a real moment of reflection where he's saying, you're right. You've treated me good and I've treated you evil. And I think that he was being sincere when he cried here. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't stay long. We've all met people that when they're confronted with the things that they've done, they might cry in that moment. They might be sincere and apologize in that moment, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't take long for them to go back to their old ways. And we'll see that with Saul. He apologizes here. It seems sincere, but it's not going to stick. He's going to go right back to hunting David. Verse 18, it says, and you have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. So even Saul's acknowledging that the Lord put him into David's hands. Well, that's true. Now, did God put Saul there so that David would kill him? No, I don't think so. It seems like he put him there as a test for David to see if he would kill him. And he did not. He passed that test. That said, there is a judgment against Saul. It will be carried out. But as we covered before with Doeg and many other times, Pilate, just because there's a judgment declared against somebody, it doesn't excuse the sin of the person that takes the judgment out on that person or people or whatever it ends up being. There's no excuse for your sin. You can't use the fact that God ordained the demise of somebody as an excuse for your own sin. It doesn't work that way. So verse 19 says, for if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? And we've been over it again and again, right? No, they won't. If a man finds his enemy, they will not let them go away safe. So again, if Saul found David, would he have let him go away safe? No. But David did find Saul, and he did let him go away safe. Saul's not David's enemy. David is Saul's enemy. So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now, behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. So the elephant in the room finally comes out. Everybody knows, everybody seems like has known it, but now it's finally out in the open between David and Saul. David is going to be the next king. Saul acknowledges it. Verse 21, swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. Well, David can swear this, and in verse 22, we'll read that. And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So Saul did make that covenant with David, and David could say that honestly because he's already made that same covenant with Jonathan. That, hey, just because your dad's trying to kill me does not mean that I'm going to go after your house. Just because your lineage is of the kingship right now doesn't mean I'm going to try to get the throne by taking you guys out, or once I do have the throne, getting rid of you guys. It's not the plan. So David agrees, I won't do that. But mostly what we notice in this section is Saul seems to be in constant torment. We've read before that when the harmful spirits would come on him, he would have David play the lyre or the harp to soothe that. And it seems like he hasn't had that for quite some time now. So what's he do with all that, all that torment? He's being torn in two different directions constantly, and he's giving in to the one, like we often do, right? The spirit and flesh are constantly in battle with each other. And when you give in to sin and you give in to the flesh, you're at odds with the spirit. And we see that Saul, throughout his time, has always just given into the flesh. It very rarely has he obeyed the spirit. So we have this war going on inside Saul. One side of him knows that David's the anointed king by God, and that he was anointed because of Saul's own failures, not because of something David did to usurp Saul's authority. It was all because of Saul's own failures. He knew in his heart that David was innocent, but his flesh, on the other hand, it was weak, and it constantly, he wanted his ego served, and he wanted to have this great legacy, and he wanted to be important, and he wanted to be king and have the lineage of kings. And in his flesh, he would do anything to make those things happen, even chasing and killing an innocent man that has supported him his whole life, or at least since he's come on the scene. So today we might say that Saul was driven and goal oriented. His focus was only on this one thing. And today we might say that that's a good characteristic. Well, if that one thing isn't God and his will, then it's not a good characteristic. It's good to be focused and driven towards God's will. It's good to be focused and driven towards goals that we want to accomplish in God's will, or as we move through God's will. But you see that Saul was going directly against God's will, knowingly. He knew that David was anointed the next king, and he intentionally was trying to stop that. So his focus throughout his life, his focus was on himself and not on God. And for that reason, even after this seemingly sincere apology, he's not going to stop hunting David. He's still going to try to kill him. So unlike Saul, if we go back to what Jesus was talking about in Matthew, we need to make sure that our tree's bearing good fruit. Right? We need to make sure that we're not the tree that bears bad fruit that gets burned in the fire. We need to make sure our tree's bearing good fruit. We can't find common ground with the people that are opposed to God's plan any more than David could with Saul. Right? David kept trying to find common ground, to smooth things over, to make things right, and he found out in the end, it just won't work if somebody is that opposed to God's will. So in those situations and in any other situation, we need to rely on the Lord to use us according to his plan, and have faith that he'll judge righteously, and that we can stay in his will and be one of these branches that bear good fruit. So I hope this blessed somebody today. It's been 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 8 to 22. Thanks for watching.